Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. Today is Saturday, where we talk about issues that affect our country using facts, figures, evidence-based analysis, and issues that are in the interest of you and I as citizens of this country, of this continent, and of this world. So without further ado, today we would like to discuss about a very, very integral topic, a topic that is in the minds of many Kenyans, and it is the minds of many people who have interest in issues about this country, and that relates to the budget at State House. In the past week, we've seen the National Daily and in the press, national TV as well, and in other social media, discussions about how bloated the budget at State House is. Indeed, it has been said that up until this moment, State House has consumed up to 100 billion shillings. Yes, you got that right. 100 billion shillings in State House or in state expenditure. We all know that the State House is a building where is the seat of power, the seat of executive power, where the president, who is a constitutional office holder, sits and does activities of running the nation. That is where probably he lives. That is where his office is. And there's a lot of hubris around his budget, his expenditure at the State House. It will be remembered that this 100 billion shillings is the combined expenditure of the previous president, Uhuru Kenyatta, who by the time he was leaving office had reached the 100 billion shilling mark. This president, William Ruto, so far, he has been able to spend 100 billion shillings in only 3 or 4 years in office. And today, this series, this Bounce Back podcast by Robert, wants to interrogate using facts, figures, evidence-based analysis, why? Why is the State House budget bloated? What are the activities that are going on there? And what does that mean in general expenditure of a country that is debt-laden, that is in the third world country bracket? And on top of that, we shall analyze this budget. We shall analyze other jurisdictions, other countries, how their budgets relate with ours, and what we can be able to do in the coming days about this budget as members of a country who are taxpayers and who feel the brunt of economic pressure. So without further ado, we shall get into it, the discussion. State House budget. Why is it bloated? Why is it high? Please like, follow, and subscribe to the Bounce Back channel, Bounce Back podcast by Robert, on YouTube at On Roberts, and on in Spotify at On Roberts. The handles will go there as we go on with the conversation in your screen, and you shall be able to like, follow, subscribe these handles. So thank you very much. I am your host, Robert Onyari. Let's get down to it, the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. So, Kenya is under fiscal pressure. Debt is over 10 trillion so far. More than half of our government revenue goes to debt. As citizens, we are being told to tighten our belts. But the question is, when money is scarce, who gets the priority? Who gets to choose how this money will be used? The leadership, the government, the people who have put in this mess, or who do we turn to when we feel that the economic pressure is a bit high? And we are going to have this discussion in about 8 points. And these 8 points will help us to determine and to go about analyzing the State House budget. In fact, we've heard previously, in the past few days, that an extreme 1 million shilling is used by the Deputy President on airfare or helicopter fare expenditure each and every day as they go around the country doing early campaigns. So we all agree that the State House or the state uses a lot of money, expenditures that cannot be sustained in a country that is debt-laden, in a country that is experiencing a lot of problems. So without further ado, the budget direction. What is this all about? So according to the 2026-2027 budgetary estimates, we did that here. We looked at the financial projections for 2026-2027, and we saw that the Kenya upcoming 2026-2027 budget is projected to be between 4.0 trillion to 4.7 trillion shillings. and that is coupled with a national government spending ceiling of about 2.8 trillion. And as the country balances growth ambitions against debt pressure, what are the data sets? What does the data tell us? That the budget policy 2026 discussion, they are talking about an expenditure ceiling for government at 2.8 trillion. That means that the government, the executive, has been allowed a 2.8 trillion shilling expenditure. That means that the executive, which is the third or one of the three arms of government, has been given a ceiling of expenditure of 2.8 trillion. So what does that mean when the full projection of the budget is 4.8 trillion shillings? That means that the fiscal pressure under this budget has been reduced. And what we are saying is that we have an immensely ambitious budget, but which is a bit conservative because of the realities on the ground. And the executive, according to projections, has been allowed to spend 2.8 trillion shillings. Now, where does the State House budget come in that expenditure? In expenditure for State House, we see each and every year that it is pegged at 50 billion shillings at the extreme. Every year, budget for State House expenditure is 50 billion shillings. But that begs the question. Recently, we've seen that there was a proposal that the supplementary budget estimates include an increment in State House budget, and it was pushed to 30 billion. And that is why this figure has been touted and has come to 100 billion shillings. So in essence, what we are saying, in the budget, we are talking about State House budget being 40 billion to 50 billion shillings. But midstream, we are seeing that there are recommendations to add in the supplementary budget another 30 billion shillings in expenditure for State House. Now, is this feasible? Is this fair? What are the facts? What is the evidence? So what is the latest State House spending as at the moment? The State House expenditure has significantly increased, with allocations rising from 8.5 billion previously to nearly 17 billion shillings per quarter, and it has moved to up to 20 to 30 billion shillings based on supplementary budget estimates and increments. So following supplementary budget adjustments, that's what we've talked about right now already, the budget, or rather the expenditure at State House has been moved or increased to 30 billion. So what does that mean for the local mwananchi, for you and I, and what are we talking about here in this podcast today? So the base has been 8.9 billion, but it has been increased to 17 billion. Then when you add the supplementary budget estimates, it has been pushed to 30 billion to 40 billion shillings. So what does this additional spending mean? We've seen many times, every weekend, the president will host delegations in State House. We see people going there, whether they are religious members of the religious community, or politicians from a certain area, or wananchi, or even we saw a very controversial meeting that was done at State House of the president's party. Members and aspirants from all over the country were invited to come and attend a meeting at the State House. Each and every day we see in the press that the president is hosting visitors. There are people who are going there. And one thing that has come out in each and every of this visit is that there are normally handouts that are given to people when they visit State House. If you go to State House today and you're meeting the president, you're likely more or less than not to leave with a handout, with something, they call it probably transport, they call it airtime, whatever they want to call it. This is taxpayers' money. Remember, the president is a public officer, is a civil servant, voted by the electorate, you and I, and he holds a constitutional office. But when he hosts meetings, delegations, and friends of his who come to the State House for meetings, for discussions, engagements, people receive handouts, people get allowances or whatever, is it per diem, things of that nature. And these are one of the reasons that are pushing this budget to go off the ceiling. These are some of the extravagant expenditures that we want to talk about, and we are talking about here. How does the president use the State House budget? I am sure that expenditures for this kind of things come out of that kitty, and that is what skyrockets this these estimates. Another thing regards to the state, or rather the president's movement, both domestically and international. It also comes out of the State House budget, or the office of the president. And in many times, or in many ways, we've seen the president going abroad, flying private, sometimes chartering a flight, sometimes carrying out delegations of many people, sometimes moving from country to country, seeking this and that, whether they are bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements, attending state functions, sorry, not state functions, attending international organizations and international functions. We've seen that the president travels large. This is the largesse that we are talking about. The president travels large. There is no delegation of the president that will go 10 people and below. We've seen in the recent times, and in this presidency or in this administration, the ministry or the minister, the cabinet secretary for foreign affairs, seeing off the president, and then we also see him receiving the president at the same time. You know, such theatrics, such things that, you know, might raise a lot of eyebrows, but we see that happening. This also comes out of this budget. This also comes out of this taxpayers' money, and we feel like these are things that we need to talk about. Another issue is the State House staff. I do not have the estimates, the figures on how many people work within and about the president. There could be more than 1,000 people, and this goes to recurrent expenditure. What amount of money is spent on salaries, per diems, allowances for people who work in the president's office, the people who work around State House, the people who work in keeping the president do his constitutional duties. This is something that also needs due regard. This is something that also extrapolates the budget. This is something that also increases the estimates. And this is something that also needs to be looked at. When the president has 1,500 staff or 2,000 people working around him, for him, or directly under him, these people have to earn salaries. These people have to earn allowances. These people have to travel. These people have to receive budgets for communication and these other things. This money comes out of the expenditure or the budgets that are put at State House. And this is the largesse that we are talking about. Remember, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. Today, I'm your host, Robert Onyari, and today we are talking about State House, the budget. How much is it that the president is using for his activities? We've already established that there's a base rate of 9 billion shillings, which has increased in the recent past to about 19 billion shillings, and it has moved because of budget estimates to 20, 30, 40 billion shillings per annum or per year, per financial year. So we move to the next point, which is a very, very strong indicator and strong point that we want to determine and to check in this debate on presidential expenditure in State House. What is the historical precedent on spending at the State House? Comparative estimates of other presidents. Remember, this is the 5th president. We had Jomo Kenyatta, then we had Daniel Moi, then we had Mwai Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now William Ruto. How much were the other presidents spending? I do not have the exact estimates, but during Kibaki era, we saw relative restrained executive footprint. During the Uhuru era, we saw expanded coordination tied to large infrastructure and policy programs. His expenditure in State House was about 30 billion shillings a year. And that is why it has been estimated, or it is being said, that what this president has spent so far in his State House budget is equivalent to what President Uhuru Kenyatta spent in all the 8 years, or all the 9 years he spent as president of this country. So what kind of largesse is this? What kind of opulence is this? What is this president doing? Why is his budget so high? Why is it so untenable? What is happening? And we've given one of the reasons, and we've said there are those delegations that he receives, that he hosts at the State House. There are these renovations that he has been doing to the building. Up until now, we've seen a lot of money that has been used in changing the outlook of the State House and how it looks like. There's an external pavilion. I've never been to the State House myself. I would wish to go there one of these fine days and to see for myself how this place has transformed from a government house to a sort of palace, to a sort of an Arab Maghreb class, castle. And this begs the question, for what For what reason is all this happening? We've seen in the recent past, the president has been saying that the staff at the State House are worshipped in a Babati structure, and he wants to commit up to 2 billion shillings to build a church at the State House. Well, he said that he would want to use his own money, but the fact of the matter is nobody will know where the money will come from, and the building will be done. So this is something that requires due regard and something that requires a lot of conversation. And we've seen that previous presidents have not been so extravagant in the usage of state expenses. President Kibaki was conservative in his usage. President Uhuru Kenyatta was almost close to this president, but was not as bad. And the reason we've said is that because of tokenism, because of patronage, because of buying political favor, we see that this president is used to throwing money around, and this money comes from state expenditure. We cannot ascertain that it is his own money. We doubt that it is his own money. This is why the budgets are high like that. If a deputy president uses up to 1 million shillings a day in air travel for a helicopter fare, how much is the president using when he travels around the country? How much is the president using to give people money that they do not deserve? How much is the president using for giving handouts and giving people money when they come and visit him? We've seen that this is a very, very generous president. When he goes to a church function, he will leave 5 million. He will leave 20 million. He says he will top you up another 2 million. He says he will give. It's always about millions, 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 millions. And this begs the question then, therefore, where could this money be going? And indeed, without further ado, based on logic, this is money that we can see it's coming out of state expense on this State House budget. We move forward again, and we want to see the number of state houses, state lodges, and the presidential footprint, public footprint in the country. When President Uhuru was leaving the office, unless I am wrong, I will remember that we had a state house in Nairobi. In Mombasa, it was a state house as well, and a few other state lodges. But as of today, there has been an expansion. We are not saying that the president should not have a footprint across the country, but the scale and the level of expansionism begs the question, or causes us to raise an eyebrow. There has been an expansion to state lodges to about 10 in the country, including Mombasa. Nakuru has been elevated as well, Eldoret as well, Kisumu, Sagana, Kakamega, Kisii, Nyeri, there's Wajir, there's also another one in Kilgoris, if I'm not wrong, or probably his own residence, and many others. Machakos also has a state lodge, and some of these small towns. So we're also seeing some of this expenditure for this budget, of the president budget, is going to starting and expanding state houses and state lodges. This costs money. Putting staff to run these places costs money. Engaging people in these places costs money. When he does meetings in these places, it costs money. When he invites people in these places, it costs money. And that is why the budget is high like that. So this is a largest president in a country that is pledging austerity measures, in a country that has a budget deficit. For every 100 shillings you earn or you pay in taxes, 6 shillings goes into budget payments. And this begs the question, why are we going against the grain? Why are we going opposite to what we keep on saying, that, we are tightening our belts, we are doing things to reduce expenditure, and we are making it easy for the local mwananchi to have life, reduce the standards of living, yet the budget at State House is at 100 billion shillings, and we are 18 months away from the elections. Once again, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. I'm your host, Robert Onyari, and today we talk about State House expenditure, the State House budget. You can follow, like, comment on our accounts at Spotify, at On Roberts, and on YouTube at On Roberts. So let's go on to the next point. What does this tally in economic pressure on citizens? So while executive spending rises, citizens continue to face persistent inflation, fuel cost volatility, increased taxation measures, and these are anchored in the Finance Act, the one that is proposed and the one that is coming, including the one that was shaken off during the Gen Z protests of 2024 and 2025. But where does policy meet daily survival? We are going to look at the austerity versus expansion gap. Government messaging telling us and emphasizing on fiscal discipline and austerity, yet executive expenditure continues to expand. This is another thing that we've already talked about, and we are saying, if indeed you're saying you want to reduce government expenditure, if indeed you say that you want to reduce the standard of life, the standard of living, if you say that you want Kenyans to have more money in the pocket, if you want to say that you want to cause universal health care, if you want to say that you're giving affordable housing, if you want to say that you're increasing, you're causing that more children, schools to get more capitation so that more of our children can go to school, then why are you going against the grain and spending so much? This is the first government in the history of Kenya that we've seen it exposing a lot of opulence, largesse, and demonstrating how they can spend money. All right? This is the government that has shown Mwananchi that there's a lot of money to spend and to waste around. Harambes where politicians whom we know how much they make and their salaries are spending upwards of 1 million to 2 million shillings in donations. People who are giving handouts during these meetings of 1,000 shillings each. You can imagine giving 1,000 shillings to about 10,000 people who to attend your rally. How much money is that? That is economic largesse, that is opulence, that is untenable. And that is where we are focusing in this Bounce Back podcast today. And I'm telling you that it cannot be that we are talking about austerity and tightening our belts and coming down to the local Mwananchi when you're spending so much and you, without due regard. The dinners, the state functions, the meetings, the invitations, the salaries, the donations, the handouts, the expenditures, the travel costs, and all these things. This president traveled to 41 countries in his first year of office alone. What does that say about his expenditure? What does that say about how much he uses? Yet he's the president that was voted by Boda Boda and Mama Mboga. We need to ask these questions, and that's why we are asking these questions on this podcast and in other platforms and in other forums in the coming days, that where does this president get this money to spend? And that is why it is a justification that the supplementary budget has added another 20 billion in State House expenditure, another 30 billion, because this president is preaching water and drinking wine. That is what we are seeing happening. There's no respect for the local Mwananchi. There's not respect for the local voter. Kenyans are overtaxed and overburdened, but the expenditure is a bit too much. There's no sensitivity for you and I, and that is why we feel that we need to talk about this. So, how does this expenditure compare to other countries around the world? How much do other places spend? What do they spend? And how does that compare to us? In the United States, for example, the White House has an expenditure of about $100 million to $200 million a year. In South Africa, it's about the same with what we spend. In the United Kingdom, it's about 80 million to 90 million pounds to run the royal family. And this begs the question. These are countries that are in the first world. These are countries that have stable economies. The United States is a $13 trillion economy. A country of that scale and size is spending $100 million. Yet it is a massive, humongous economy. Why is Kenya spending that much money? Yet we are a third world, middle economy, a country that is heavy laden with debt, a country that is surviving, that is on its knees, a country that is borrowing at every moment and time that we cannot sustain. Why can't we be sensitive to the local mwananchi, to the taxpayers, to people who dedicate their lives each and every day to run the country? Why can't we be sensitive to them? KRA is always on the necks of Kenyans each and every time, collecting taxes, meeting targets, and telling us how it is important. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. Then why is this ushuru being spent in opulence and largesse and in braggadocious manner in that nature? Is that sensitivity? Is that austerity? Is that feeling what the mwananchi feels? A president who is spending a lot of money like that for a country like this one, that's not sensitivity. That is not austerity. That is not understanding what the local mwananchi is. That is opulence. That is largesse. That is discrimination. And that is basically lack of understanding. They have not read the room and they do not understand the kind of problems that we go through. So in this Bounce Back podcast by Robert, today we've analyzed this and we've seen how tough it is, how bad it is, and how things need to change. Things need to change, and that's why we are talking about. It all boils down to leadership and governance and policy. Be that as it may, it begs the question, therefore, what do we do going on forward? How do we deal with this when we have leaders who are not sensitive? When we want leaders who preach wine and who preach water and drink wine? When we have leaders who do not understand where we're coming from? When we have state agencies who are not sensitive to the plight of the local mwananchi, then what do we do about it? Then what question does it beg? Do we say that we let this continue to happen? Do we continue to say that, let us give them an opportunity, probably they will change? If somebody does not understand your sensitivity, if somebody does not understand your suffering, if somebody does not pay due regard in how bad things are for you, is that person someone deserving of an opportunity or a chance? This is not campaign. This is not political rhetoric. These are just facts and figures. This is evidence-based analysis. And we are looking at it and we are saying it is enough. It is not tenable. We cannot continue to go like this. We cannot continue to live like this, because at the end of the day, this country is ours, all of us. If we leave a few to finish, to decide for the many, and to dominate the many, then we will get ourselves into a lot of problems. So in conclusion, as I wind up this podcast, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. You will find this video on YouTube and on Spotify and on the links and on the hashtags and on the accounts that are there on your screen. Please be sure to like, subscribe, where we come every Saturday at 8 p.m. to discuss about the issues that affect our country, our continent, issues making headlines using facts, figures, evidence-based analysis, because at the end of the day, we need to know the truth. And the facts and the figures and the numbers, since they do not lie, then that is where the truth lies. Once again, I'm your host, Robert Onyari, a policy, strategy, development, and governance consultant stroke expert at CBA Rufus. www.cbarufus.com is our webpage, our website, and there you will find our work, what we do, how we do it, and how we analyze issues using evidence, using facts, using figures to determine where the trajectory. As I sign off, I want to remind you that State House expenditure as of this year has gotten to the 100 billion shilling mark. There was a request at the supplementary budget to Parliament to increase the allocation to another 30 billion before the year is over, meaning that State House has already expended its budget for this year, and we are saying that it is untenable, it is unfair to you and I, and we need to do something about it. So once again, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. You can find it on YouTube at on Roberts and on Spotify at on Roberts. Thank you very much. Till we meet next time, next Saturday, for the next topic: fiery facts, figures, evidence-based analysis. No fear, no favor. I am your host, Robert Onyari, signing off for this week and saying, please be careful, check out, and be cognizant about the issues that affect you each and every day. Asante sana. Tuonane next time. Thank you.